X. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't pack a second bag. She just stood in the doorway of the only home she'd ever known, holding a garbage bag with her winter coat and 2 textbooks inside, and watched Paulette Renault close the door in her face. X. Not slam it. Close it. Slow and deliberate. The way you close a door, when you want someone to know they don't matter enough to be angry at. X. Céleste Beaumont was 19 years old. X. The porch light was already off. X. People ask how something like that happens. How a father lets his wife push his daughter out into a February night in Gatineau with nothing but a garbage bag and a transit card. And the honest answer is that it doesn't happen all at once. It happens the way ice forms on a river, slowly, quietly, until one day you step out and the whole thing gives way beneath you and you realize it was never solid to begin with. X. Robert Beaumont had met Paulette 2 years after Céleste's mother passed. He was a civil engineer with a good salary and a generous heart, and a grief he didn't know what to do with. Paulette was polished and decisive, and she laughed at his jokes, and she made the house feel less empty for about 6 months, which was long enough for him to propose. X. She had a son from her first marriage, Theodore, 16, soft-handed, the kind of boy who'd never been told no for anything that mattered. X. Céleste had tried. She had genuinely, earnestly tried. She set the table without being asked. She helped Theodore with his homework even when he was rude about it. She stayed quiet when Paulette rearranged her mother's kitchen. When Paulette painted over the blue accent wall in the living room her mother had picked out herself. When Paulette referred to the house as our home, in a way that made the word our feel very small and very exclusive. X. She stayed quiet for 2 years. X. And then one evening in February, Paulette told Robert that she'd spoken to a counselor, that the tension in the house was affecting Theodore's school performance, that she felt it would be best for everyone if Céleste found somewhere else to stay, maybe an aunt, maybe student housing. Robert had a full-time position now, and couldn't Céleste manage with a little help to get started? X. Robert looked at his plate. X. He said he'd think about it. X. He didn't think about it very long. X. 3 days later, Paulette handed Céleste a garbage bag and said her room needed to be cleared out by Friday. She said it the way you'd tell someone the dishwasher was ready to be unloaded. No ceremony, no apology, no acknowledgement that she was talking to a 19-year-old who had just lost the last stable thing in her life. X. Robert Beaumont was in his office with the door closed. Céleste knocked. He didn't answer. X. She left the house at 7:14 in the evening with a garbage bag, her transit card, and a silver bracelet her mother had left her, the one Paulette had asked about twice, wondering aloud where it had come from. X. Céleste kept walking until she reached the bus stop. She sat down on the bench. The temperature was -11. She put her coat on over her hoodie, and she did not cry, because she had already made a decision, standing in that doorway, watching the door close. X. She was going to be fine. X. She was going to be more than fine. X. She just needed time. X. Her Aunt Odette let her sleep on the couch in her one-bedroom apartment in Hull for 3 months. No questions asked, the way Caribbean women of a certain generation absorb crisis without commentary. Odette worked nights at the hospital and left Céleste the apartment during the dark hours, and Céleste used that time to apply to every bursary, every grant, every student assistance program she could find. She deferred her second semester. X. She worked double shifts at a grocery distribution center in Aylmer. She slept when she could. X. She was also quietly making another decision. X. She'd always been athletic, track in high school, boxing at the rec center on St. Joseph, the kind of physical competence that comes from being raised by a woman who believed the body was something you maintained. But after that February, something shifted. She started training with a focus she hadn't had before, not for sport, for something harder to name. A conviction, maybe, that the world could push, and she needed to be the kind of person who pushed back. X. She enlisted at 21. Canadian Army Reserve, then a full-time commission after 18 months. She served 2 rotations overseas, one in Latvia with a NATO mission, one in a training support role in West Africa. She came back to Canada at 26 with a straight back and a calm that some people read as coldness and others recognized, correctly, as discipline. X. She also came back with a plan. X. During her service, in the spare hours between rotations, she had taken every online course she could access. Real estate law, property management, financial analysis. She'd read books about commercial acquisition, about land assessment, about the way cities expand and where the value moves when they do. She didn't talk about it much. She just kept reading. When she left the military at 28, she had savings, no debt, a network of contacts she'd cultivated carefully, and a clarity of purpose that made people slightly nervous when they sat across from her in meetings. She moved back to the Ottawa-Gatineau region. She started small, a duplex in Aylmer that needed work. She did half the repairs herself and hired a contractor she trusted for the rest. She found tenants. She managed it herself for 8 months, learned what she didn't know, hired a property manager, and used the equity to leverage her next acquisition. Then another. Then 3 more. Then a mid-rise in Gatineau's Old Hull district that she bought from a developer who was over-leveraged and desperate, and who did not look closely enough at the quiet woman in the tailored jacket who sat across from him and offered him a clean exit. She was 33. She had never once called her father. The building on Rue Laurier had 12 units. Céleste had known about it for 2 years before she bought it. She'd tracked the ownership through public registry, records the way a hunter reads signs in snow. She knew who held the mortgage. She knew the maintenance history. She knew that the ownership had changed hands 4 years prior, when the original landlord retired and sold it to a numbered company that turned out, after some very careful research, to be registered partly in the name of one Paulette Renaud Beaumont. She knew this. She bought the building anyway. She bought it through her holding company at fair market value, in a transaction that was entirely legal and entirely clean, and in which Paulette's numbered company received full payment and had no grounds for complaint. The previous property manager sent the standard tenant notification letters, standard language, change of ownership, new management contact, rent payments to be redirected accordingly. Paulette received hers on a Tuesday. Céleste scheduled the building walkthrough for the following Thursday. She arrived in the same kind of jacket she always wore now, dark wool, clean lines, with her property manager beside her and a clipboard and the particular stillness that had become, over the years, just the way her face sat when she was at work. She walked the ground floor first, checked the fire exits, noted a cracked baseboard in Unit 3, wrote it down. She took the stairs. Unit 8 was on the 2nd floor, east side. She knew the number. She knocked. The woman who opened the door was older. That was the first thing. The sharp precision that Paulette had always worn like armor had softened at the edges, not into warmth but into something closer to anxiety. Her hair was still well maintained. Her earrings were still gold. But her eyes, when they moved from Céleste's face to the clipboard to her face again, had a quality that Céleste recognized after a beat. She was trying to remember something. Good afternoon, Céleste said. I'm the new owner. I'm doing a walkthrough of all units today. Standard practice after a change of ownership. Is now a good time? Paulette's mouth did something complicated. The new owner, she said. That's right. There was a pause. Behind Paulette, Théodore appeared in the hallway, 32 now, heavier, with the same soft hands Céleste remembered, standing in a rental apartment wearing a housecoat at 2 in the afternoon. He looked at Céleste and something crossed his face that wasn't recognition but was close to it, a feeling without a name. Do I? Paulette started. Have we met? Céleste held the doorframe with 2 fingers and looked at her steadily. My name is Céleste Beaumont, she said. My father is Robert Beaumont. You were married to him for 11 years. The silence that followed was the kind that fills a room. Paulette's hand moved to the door, not to close it, but as if she needed something to hold on to. I'm going to need to see the interior for the inspection, Céleste said, not unkindly. It won't take long. She did not evict them. This is the part that people always ask about, when the story gets told. And it does get told. Théodore talked, apparently, in the way anxious people talk when they don't know what else to do, and it moved through the building and then through a wider network of people who knew the Beaumont family in Gatineau, and eventually it circled back to Robert himself, who heard it secondhand from a colleague who'd heard it at a dinner party. But Céleste did not evict them. She renewed their lease at the market rate, which was slightly higher than what they'd been paying, because the building had been underpriced, and she ran things correctly, but not punishingly. She filed the maintenance requests that had been deferred. She fixed the heating issue in the east corridor that had apparently been unresolved for a year and a half. She did what a responsible owner does. She ran the building. She did her job. She did not send Paulette a message. She did not seek a confrontation. She did not need one. She had walked into that unit, said her name, watched the woman who had handed her a garbage bag and closed a door in her face process the reality of what had just happened to her. And then she had inspected the hallway closet and noted that the hinge on the upper cabinet needed replacing. It was noted. It was repaired. Everything was handled correctly. Some things don't need to be said out loud to be understood completely. Her father called on a Sunday in March. She let it go to voicemail. He called again on the Wednesday. She let that go too. On the Friday, he called a third time, and she was sitting in her car outside a property in Orléans, and she looked at the screen for a long moment, and she picked up. Céleste. His voice was older, careful, the voice of a man who knew he was calling from a position of very little ground. Robert, she said. A pause. I heard about the building. It's a good acquisition, she said. Good bones. The east corridor needed some work. Another pause, longer this time. She could hear him trying to find the words for something that probably didn't have good words. Paulette said you were professional about everything. I was professional, Céleste said. I'm always professional. I wanted to. He stopped. Started again. I don't know if sorry covers it. What happened? What I let happen? I've thought about it a lot. For a long time. Céleste looked out the windshield at the property she'd come to assess. A duplex. Older brick. The kind of thing that looks tired from the outside and rewards patience. I know, she said. I should have. I know, she said again, and her voice wasn't cold, but it was very clear. I know what you should have done, Robert, and I know what you didn't do. And I've spent 14 years building a life that didn't need you to do it. So I don't need the apology to survive. But if you want to give it, I'll hear it. He gave it. It took him a while, and it was imperfect, the way real apologies always are when they've been carried around too long before being spoken. Worn smooth in some places, still raw in others. He talked about grief, about being lost, about choosing comfort over courage, about Théodore and Paulette and the years that had passed, about calling once when she was 23 and hanging up before it rang. She listened. She didn't fill the silences for him. When he finished, she said, I have a walkthrough in 20 minutes, but I'm glad you called. Will you? He paused. Can we talk again sometime? She thought about the duplex outside her window, the older brick, the rewards of patience. We can try, she said. She ended the call and sat quietly for a moment. Then she got out of the car, straightened her jacket, and walked up to assess the building. What happened next? People who know Céleste talk about the way you talk about someone who did something quietly remarkable. Not with loud admiration, but with a particular kind of respect that doesn't quite have a word in English. She kept managing the building on Rue Laurier. Paulette and Théodore stayed. They paid rent on time every month, which Céleste would be the first to tell you is all a landlord ever really asks of a tenant. She did not forgive Paulette in the way movies mean forgiveness. There was no scene, no declaration, no healing circle. What there was a February afternoon about a year after the walkthrough when Paulette knocked on the building manager's office door, a small room on the ground floor that Céleste used twice a week, and stood in the doorway holding an envelope. The envelope contained a birthday card. Paulette had apparently looked up Céleste's birthday in the rental application, February 14th. The same date she'd closed the door. I know it doesn't, Paulette started. Thank you, Céleste said. She took the envelope. She didn't open it right away. Paulette stood there for a moment longer, as if she'd expected something more. Accusation, or absolution, or at least the relief of drama. Then she seemed to understand that this was all there was going to be, and she nodded and she left. Céleste set the card on her desk and went back to her files. Some doors close. Some doors you buy the building around. She'd learned in the years since that February night on the porch in Gatineau that there are two kinds of power. The kind that comes from being able to make someone feel small, and the kind that comes from being so completely irreversibly okay that the person who once made you feel small has to live inside the life you built. X. She knew which kind she had. X. She had always known. X. I keep thinking about that garbage bag. X. Not the contents of it. A winter coat, 2 textbooks, a silver bracelet she almost lost, but the choice it represented. Someone had decided, without much deliberation, that a 19-year-old girl was less important than the comfort of keeping the peace. And the strange thing is, that decision ended up shaping everything, just not in the way the person who made it intended. X. What I notice about Céleste's story, and I've sat with it for a while, is that she didn't win because she got lucky. She won because she made a different kind of choice in that same doorway. While Paulette was closing a door, Céleste was making a quiet decision to build something. You don't always see those two things happening at the same moment, but they were. One woman was exercising power. The other was deciding what to do with the powerlessness she'd just been handed. X. That's the part that stays with me. X. There's a version of this story where Céleste spends the next 14 years angry, where the anger becomes the engine, and anger can move you. Don't let anyone tell you it can't, but it's expensive fuel. It burns through everything around it, including the person carrying it. X. What Céleste seemed to understand, maybe instinctively, maybe through sheer exhaustion, is that the most effective thing she could do was simply become someone Paulette could never have imagined when she handed over that garbage bag. Not out of revenge. Out of something more durable than revenge. X. I think about the discipline it took. The online courses between rotations, the real estate law textbooks, the duplex in Aylmer she half-renovated with her own hands. None of that is glamorous. None of that is the montage version of rising. It's just showing up, day after day, and building something real when it would have been so much easier to stay bitter and call it justified. X. That's what I mean when I think about the kind of strength that actually holds. It's not the dramatic kind. It's the kind that looks like patience from the outside and feels like stubbornness from the inside. X. And then there's the moment she knocks on Unit 8. She doesn't go in hot. She doesn't need to. She just says her name, Céleste Beaumont. My father is Robert Beaumont, and lets the weight of 14 years settle into the room without raising her voice once. That kind of composure doesn't come from suppressing something. It comes from having genuinely resolved it inside yourself long before you ever walk through that door. X. The birthday card Paulette slid under the office door a year later. That hit me differently than I expected. Not because it changes what happened. It doesn't. But because Céleste took it, set it on her desk, and went back to her files. No scene, no absolution. Just a person who had long since stopped needing the acknowledgement to feel okay about who she was. X. I think that's the whole thing, really. The goal was never to make Paulette feel small. The goal was to become so completely, irreversibly herself that the question of what Paulette felt became almost beside the point. X. That's not something you get handed. That's something you build.